got the ATV stood up on its back end here so we can have a good look at the underbelly. I'm prepping here for a skid plate project where I'm going to take off the factory skid plates and replace it with the Iron Baltic plastic skid plate set. But before we start into that, I thought it'd be a good opportunity just to have a little look at some of the stuff that's underneath in stock form. Taking a look at the factory protection that's offered. These are they're not really skid plates. I would call them more just sort of brush guards. You can see there's not a great deal of coverage there on the A-arm guards, and they're pretty thin and flimsy. There, as far as the factory skid plates go, you've got the front bash plate here that wraps around the winch and the bumper. There's two bolts here. Hold that on. And then we've got the factory centerpiece skid plate here. Goes down the middle of the bike. We can see there's no protection there at the back, and you've got the big open space here where the drive shaft is. Nothing really protecting the back end of the frame. And then if we also have a look here on the left and the right, there's no factory protection of the footwells, so those are wide open. And the Iron Baltic skid plate set's going to take care of all of that for us. And then finally, if we have a look here at the stock protection offered for the rear A-arms, very, very minor. Nothing covering the A-arm itself, really. Nothing covering the axles. Not much protection of the differential there. So we'll pull back here. Again, this is a look at the underneath of the Can-Am Outlander 1000.
The first step you need to accomplish when you remove the stock parts is to remove the hook from the winch. To remove the hook, you have to pull the cotter pin from the mounting pin. I like to use side cutters for pulling cotter pins because you can get a good bite on the cotter pin and also use the curve of the jaws as a lever to work the cotter pin out. Once you have the hook removed, pull the cable free, and then next remove the winch fair lead. The bolts are an 8mm Allen key, and the nuts on the back side take a 15mm wrench. With the fair lead removed, you'll need to remove the following stock components: the A-arm skid plates, the stock center skid plate, and the stock trailing arm skid plates. The stock front skid plate, or the bash plate, will be reused and will therefore remain in place. This picture shows all the fasteners you need to remove to get the stock skid plates off. They are as follows. A is the front skid plate bolts, which are T40 Torx with 13mm wrench for the nuts on the back side. B are the front A-arm bolts, T30 Torx with 10mm wrench for the nuts on the back side. C, the center skid plate bolts. You need a 10mm socket and a 10mm wrench for the nuts on the back side. D are the footwell bolts. You need a 10mm socket. E are the rear trailing arm skid plate bolts, T30 Torx with a 10mm wrench for the nuts on the back. And F is the rear trailing arm skid plate bolts, T30 Torx, again with a 10mm wrench for the nuts on the back side. Start by removing the front A-arm bolts. This is the right side. And also remove the left side. Move on to removing the front or the bash plate skid plate bolts with the T40 Torx and a 13mm wrench for the nuts on the back side. Next, remove the center skid plate bolts. Use a 10mm socket for the bolt heads and a 10mm wrench for the nuts on the back side. There are 6 in total you need to remove, as shown by the red arrows in this picture. I used a 1/4-inch drive ratchet with extension and a 10mm socket on the bolt heads, and of course a 10mm combination wrench on the back side for the nuts. This picture shows the 6 bolts removed from the center skid plate. With the bolts removed, you have to work the factory center skid plate out from between the frame and the factory metal bash plate. It can be quite tight. You may have to work it back and forth to lever it out. You may even have to pry a little bit to get it out, get it loose, but it will come out. Next, move on to removing the first 4 rear trailing arm skid plate bolts. There are 2 on each side, as shown by the red arrows. There are T30 Torx for the bolt head and a 10mm wrench for the nuts on the back side. With those removed, the last 2 rear trailing arm skid plate bolts, there's 1 per side, again T30 Torx and 10mm nut, are a little less obvious. The nut is accessible from inside the wheel, as shown in this picture at the red arrow, and the T30 Torx bolt can be reached through the wheel. I used a 1/4-inch drive ratchet with a long extension to reach the bolt head. With those removed, you finally have to also remove the 2 Footwell bolts per side, for 4 total, using a 10mm socket. The positions of the bolts you need to remove are indicated here by the red arrows, and from the top view of the Footwells, again you can see here with the red arrows showing the bolts that need to be removed. This is the left side. This picture shows a close-up of the left side Footwell bolt locations, obviously seen from underneath. Once you've removed the bolts, these holes will be reused when the Iron Baltic Footwell skid plates are installed later. Once you've done all that, with all the stock skid plates removed, this is what you are left with, and we can move on to the next step.
So this is a quick comparison of the stock skid plate with the Iron Baltic skid plate set. This is the stock skid plate. As you can see, it's pretty thin, fairly flimsy, very flexible, twists and bends, not very rigid, not a lot of protection. It's more of a, I would call it a paint protector than anything else. Not going to be a lot of impact protection with that piece. And then here's one of the pieces from the Iron Baltic skid plate set. It's 10mm thick, very thick and rigid. This is obviously the front skid plate, bash plate. Rigid, tough, doesn't bend. Lots better protection there with this piece than there is with the stock skid plate. So here we have a comparison of the front A-arm protectors. This one here is the stock Can-Am piece, and this one here is the Iron Baltic replacement piece. Again, you can pretty much see for yourself the difference in the amount of coverage and protection, and much like the skid plates as well, the stock piece is pretty flexible, pretty thin, not much to it. Nice thick piece from Iron Baltic, rigid, offers good protection, and also a decent amount of cutouts available so that you can wash the mud and dirt and gravel and crap out of them, so they don't trap all that. So that's the front A-arm, and now we'll take a look here at the rear trailing arm protectors. This piece here is the factory Can-Am piece. It's pretty much a joke, really. It's not very robust, not much to it. And again, I mean, just look at the comparison between them. This piece is the Iron Baltic, same thick, rigid, tough material, and again, decent amount of cutouts for washing mud and crap out of them. So that's that for the comparison. So the first step in installing the Iron Baltic skid plate set is to install the middle skid plate. That's this piece here. And in order to do that, we need the following parts. We need part number 10, 4 of those. That's the L-shaped bracket. We got 4 of those. Part number 29, which is the M8 carriage bolt, 20 millimeters long. 8 of those, 8 matching M8 lock nuts, which is part number 36, and 8 matching M8 washers, which is part number 31. For tools, I've got a pair of side cutters and a zip tie, because I need to move one of the zip ties from the factory out of the way, and then just a 13 millimeter socket. So first thing we need to do is the water pump weep hose. We actually need to use this hole, so I'm going to cut this zip tie here, move that out of the way, and then I'm going to just put a new one here to keep that hose in place. Just pop a new one on there, like so. Hold that hose. The next step is we have to remove 4 of the factory carriage bolts. One here, one here.
One here at the back of the cross member, and the last one on the other side, also on the back of the cross member, facing backwards.
And so we just need a 13 millimeter socket for that. Put the socket on there. Remove the nut and washer and carefully drop that carriage bolt out. Take that out, so that's the factory pieces that come out of there. And we're going to repeat that 3 more times to take the other ones off. So the new bracket, part number 10, I'm going to place one there using 2 of the carriage bolts supplied, and then one goes underneath there, and then repeat the same on the other side. So we have one there and one will go under there. In order to do that, first thing we've got to do is fish the carriage bolts up through the hole in the cross member. It can be a little bit tricky. One, and then I'm just going to put a nut on that to hold it there so it doesn't drop back through. So I've got the carriage bolts fished there through the holes, and I just spun a nut on the end to stop them from falling back through. So one at a time I'll take off the nut, drop it of course. Slip one of the holes of the bracket over the bolt, and then goes on the washer, and then we'll spin the nut back on, hold it there, and then repeat the other side. Let's get the nut off, get ourselves a washer, slip the bracket over, pop on the washer, spin the nut on, like so, and then we'll tighten those down. Make sure that the bracket is even with flush with the bottom of the frame there. So I'm just going to take a level and I tighten them up and hold it there so that they're nice and flush. And we'll repeat that for all 4 brackets. And then we'll get back to you as soon as I've got all those done. So this is the center skid plate from the Iron Baltic set. That's the first one we're going to install. But before I get to installing it on the brackets, one thing I noticed is it will block off the engine oil drain. If we look up here on the bike, we can see right through here is the engine oil drain plug, and I'd like to be able to get to that without having to remove the skid plate. So what I need to do is I'm going to drill a hole in the skid plate before I install it so that I can still reach that. So if we come back down here to the skid plate, I'm drilling an 1.5-inch hole 37 millimeters over from the center of the leftmost hole. I've already got it started. I'm just going to finish that here using a hole saw. Okay, I'll tidy up those edges with a file in a moment, but now I can show you. I'm going to just hold it up in place here. This is where it's going to go, like so. And now you can see that we can still access the engine oil drain with the skid plate installed. And I don't think drilling that hole reduces the strength at all, or the coverage, so we'll get to installing that right away. So now we're going to go ahead and install the center skid plate. In order to do that, we need 4 bolts, part number 24, an M8 by 20 millimeter bolt, and 4 each of part number 32, which is this dished washer, and a 13 millimeter socket. Go ahead, put the skid plate up in position. I should mention the larger tabs, if you will, go towards the front of the bike. Hold that up in position. Take one of our dish washers and a bolt. We'll just thread that into those brackets that we've installed. Just get it started. Okay, so we want to make sure that the cutouts around the bolt heads in the frame are centered and even. We'll just do that. And we'll take our ratchet, tighten the skid plate up. So the next step is to install the plates that on the sides of the center skid, and those are going to be the attachment points for the Footwell skid guards that we're going to install later. The first 6 pieces we're going to put on are the flat plates. That's part number 11. It's a flat mounting tab, and both holes are drilled and tapped, so it doesn't really matter which way they go round. I'm going to install those with the M6 by 20 millimeter bolts that have the flared head, and 6 of the M6 little conical heavy washers. And proceed as follows. There's going to be 1 tab that goes in each of the 3 holes down the side, so 3 on one side and 3 on the other side in these holes. And we'll just put the tab behind, the bolt and the washer, put the tab behind, start the bolt, make sure we get the threads lined up nicely. There we go. And we'll just snug that up with an Allen key in a moment. And then we'll go ahead and do the same for each of the other ones. Okay, so I'm just tightening the last of those 6 flat brackets there. You need it's a 4 millimeter Allen key. And I've just snugged them up. I can tighten them all up later once we get everything installed. And the next thing we're going to install are the angled tabs, the angled brackets. There's 2 of them. Part number 13 is the more angled one. It's about 40-degree bend. There's 2 of those. Part number 12 is the less angled one. It's about a 20-degree bend. There's two of those. And again, we're going to install them with the part number 26 M6 by 20 flared head bolts and the M6 conical washers. Part number 13, the more angled of them, those go up on the front, so they're going to go just behind the this tab here. We'll put that in there, and then again, much as before, we'll use a bolt and a conical washer. Just get this together here. There we go. So we'll put the tab behind like that, and then get our bolt started. And that's part number 13. We'll snug that up in a moment. Same on the other side. Part number 12. That one goes down here at the back, a little wing, just behind like that. So we'll, again, put our bolt through, get it started. Let's do that finger tight, like that, so that's 12. And then repeat the same on the side, other side, and we'll snug them up, and then move on to the next step. So I'm just finishing tightening the last of the bent brackets. That's number 12, again with the 4mm Allen wrench. And now we've got 5 more of the flat brackets, part number 11, to install. 3 at the bottom and 2 at the top. And we're going to use, this time we're going to use part number 19, which is the M6 by 16 hex head bolt. Part number 30, which is the little M6 washers. And part number 32, which is that dished washer. So we'll start with the 2 at the top. Place a washer onto our bolt and then into our dished washer. And the 2 at the front go behind these 2 large holes. That's why we're using those big dished washers. So we just got to fit the tab behind there and get our bolt started. Again, do another one there, and then I'll show you where the lower ones go in these 3 holes. So again, get our bolt and washer assembly together. And then just hold our tab behind. Pop the washer in there. Do that up finger tight. Repeat for the other 2. And then when we snug those up, these M6 bolts take a 10mm socket, so we'll just use a 10mm socket to snug those up. And once we've done all those, we'll move on to the next step. So the next step is to install the Footwell skid plates, what they refer to as the side plates in the instructions. And we have those laid out in front of us here. And the way they go is obviously the outside lip goes on the outside of the bike, and the more angled lip goes towards the front. So that means this is the left hand piece, and I'll just show you where that fits here on the left hand side. So with the more angled piece towards the front, it's pretty obvious it fits together like a jigsaw puzzle almost. And that fits there into place like that. And there are a total of 7 fasteners per side that hold it on. We're going to do the first 5 first. There's 1 up front, 3 down the middle, and 1 to the rear. And those all go into the tabs that we've previously installed. So there was the angled tab 13, the 3 flat tabs, and then the slightly less angled tab 12. So that's 5 per side. And as for the hardware we use for those 5, once again it's part number 26 5 per side. That's the M6 by 20 bolt, and the M6 conical washer, part number 33. 5 on each side. So I'll just get this one started. Take a washer and a bolt. Fit the skid plate into position. Just get that started. Do that up. Grab our trusty 4mm Allen key just to get that one started. Leave a little loose so we can do the alignment. And then there's 2 more through the flat tabs there, and the other 2, one here and one there. So I'll just go ahead and install those, and then do the same on the other side. I'll just show you. This one obviously fits the same way, like so. We'll put in those 5 bolts, and then there's 2 more bolts per side, and I'll show you where those go next. So to finish mounting the Footwell skid plates, we've got 2 more bolts per side, and those go through these holes here, and on the other side over here, and they go up through into the original footwells, and then a nut goes on the back side. This is the hardware we're going to use. And we've got 4 of these. It's part number 23. That's an M6 by 60mm bolt. I think it's the longest of the M6 bolts, with a 10mm head. Then we've got some more part number 30, the M6 washers. And we've got 4 part number 32, the dishwashers we're familiar with. And then on the back side of the footwell, or the top of the footwell, we've got 4 part number 35. That's an M6 nylock nut. So we'll start by putting a washer on our bolt, and then one of the dishwashers, and then it threads up through the hole. And there are threads. There's a threaded insert in the factory footwell, so we just tighten it up into there. And if you could follow me around to the other side here, you can see here the footwell, and then we're going to put a nylock nut on each of those and tighten that down. And we'll have to hold it the other side with a wrench, but that's where those 2 go. And that completes the installation of the footwell skid plates. Of course, we do the same on the other side, and then it's on to the next step. Prior to installing the front skid plate, or the bash plate as it's sometimes known, we're first going to install the reinforcing bracket, aluminum bracket. It's part number 14. It goes right there. And then the hardware we're going to use to install it, we've got part number 27, which is an M6 bolt, again with the flared head. And then to go along with that, we've got the conical washer, part number 33, a regular part number 30, regular M6 washer, and part number 35, which is the M6 nylock nut. So we'll just put the conical washer on the bolt, and then that goes through from the underside, and then through the hole in the bracket. We drop the washer on, and then the nylock nut, like so. And then we'll use our 10mm socket along with our Allen key, tighten that up. got that installed. And the next step will be to install the front bash plate. So now that we have the front skid plate mounted with the aluminum reinforcing bracket, it's time to install it on the machine. There's 3 sets of hardware we're going to use to do that. At the bottom end we're going to use part number 19, that's the M6 by 16 millimeter bolt, along with part number 30, the M6 flat washer, and part number 32, which is the disc washer. And there's 2 each of those. In the middle we're going to use part number 27, which is the M6 by 30 millimeter bolt with the flared head. Part number 33, which is the M6 conical washer. Part number 30, which is the M6 flat washer, and part number 35, which is the M6 nylock washer. 2 sets each of those. And then up at the front we're going to use part number 28, which is an M8 by 60 millimeter washer with a flared head, along with part number 34, which is the M8 conical washer, and then part number 36, which is the M8 nylock nut. For tools, we're going to need a 13 millimeter open-ended wrench. We're going to need both 4 and 5 millimeter hex keys or Allen keys, and we're also going to need a 10 millimeter socket. First thing we need to do, first I'll show you the where those mounting locations, where that hardware goes. The lower set goes here into these 2 tabs. That joins the front skid plate to the center skid plate. Then the second set, the M6 with the conical washers, you can use either this set of holes or this set of holes. I chose to use this set because I think it's better spaced, but more importantly it's a lot easier to get in behind there to get the nylock nuts on. And then the M8 bolts, the larger bolts, they go up here through the factory bash plate, which remains in place. So the first thing we have to do is take out the factory bushings and replace them with the slightly wider Iron Baltic bushings. And we'll do that first, then we'll mount the skid plate. So to get the factory bushings out, I used a small flat-bladed screwdriver and just levered them out. Just sort of get in there and pop them out. They're loose here because I've actually loosened them up earlier, but yeah, you just need to get the screwdriver in there and work it behind them and pop them out. And then in their place we're going to put the Iron Baltic bushings. This is the Iron Baltic replacement bushing. You can see it's quite a bit wider, and you can see the little lip there. That's the part that's going to go into the factory bash plate. So this is the hole, and we're just going to take it with that lip facing inwards. I'll just insert it like that and push it into the hole. It's not a super tight fit, but it should stay in there by itself. And then we'll do the other side as well, and then we'll install the skid plate. So we'll put the skid plate up in place like so, and the first ones to go on are the ones with the bolts with the dishwashers. We'll just get those started. Leave everything just sort of finger tight till we get everything installed and lined up, and then we can come back and tighten everything up. So get these 2 installed first. Like so. And then we'll put our bolts into our conical washers. Like I mentioned, here are the 2 sets of holes. I'm going to use this set here. So get the bolts. Have to do one at a time, I expect. Put the bolt in place, and then we have to go behind with the washer and the nylock nut. We'll just put those on finger tight. We got those ones loosely in place. And now we want to take our winch cable, from which we earlier removed the hook, and pass it through the winch cable opening in the skid plate. Pull that through there. And now we're going to put the big M8 bolts with the nylock nuts through the skid plate and the aluminum bracket, and then through the bushings and the factory bash plate and the frame. And you need to wiggle them through, get them lined up through all of those pieces. And it just takes a little bit of fiddling around. Get that pressed in there, and then get the nuts started on the back again, just finger tight. And then we'll tighten all of those up, and then once we got those tight, we'll reinstall the factory fair lead with the original hardware, and that'll be the front all buttoned up. So I'll tighten those up, and then we'll get back to you with the next stage. Okay, to install the rear skid plate, two sets of hardware. The first set that joins it to the center skid plate, we have part number 19, which is the little M6 by 16 millimeter bolt, and then part number 30, which is the M6 washer, and part 32, which is the dished washer. We've got 3 each of those, and then at the rear we're going to use part number 25, which is an M8 by 35 millimeter bolt, part number 32, which is a dished washer, and then the little square tab with the threads cut into it, that's part number 16. I think it's just called a plate on the instruction sheet. And where the skid plate mounts, we're going to attach 3 positions here, and then the larger bolt, the M8 with the square plate behind, will go through the frame here and the square plate on the back side. So it'll mount here in this position. I'll just get the center one of these started to hold that in place. Like that. And then the larger bolt with the little plate behind it. It's a little bit tricky. Fish that in position here. And it goes up through there, and the plate will have to fish in from behind and do that up. So I'll do that now, and then that'll be the skid plates all installed, and the next phase I'll show you how to do the front and rear suspension arm protectors. So with all the skid plates now mounted, the next thing we're going to do is put the front A-arm protectors on. These are them. And to tell left from right, if you look at the front lip, it has a higher raised point. That goes to the outside. So obviously this one's the left and goes on like that, and the other one's the right. As far as the hardware required, first we're going to use part number 22, which is an M6 by 40 millimeter bolt. And along with that, part number 30, the M6 washer, part number 32, the dished washer, and part number 35, the M6 nylock nut. And there's one each of those for each side. And there's also 2 clamps per side. The clamp is part number 17. It's the small clamp with the sort of Z bend in it, like that. 2 of those per side. And to mount the clamps, what we're going to use is part number 20, which is M6 by 20 millimeter bolt, 2 per side. Part number 30, M6 washers, 2 per side, and of course part number 32, dished washer, 2 per side. So I'll show you where they mount now. Basically, with the higher point to the outside, they're going to mount up here like this against the A-arms. The first fasteners that we're going to put in go through this hole here, and they are going to mount through this factory hole in the A-arm. So that'll help us get it situated and located. And once we have that one in, then we'll know where to position our clamps. I'll just show you now, before we start, exactly how the clamps fit. Basically, the portion of the clamp with the threaded hole, that's going to point to the inside of the A-arm. So the top one is going to mount sort of like this, and then the bottom one is going to mount the opposite way around and mount something like that. So that's basically how the clamps go, roughly in those positions, and the other one through the factory hole. So let's get the first one mounted up. I'll put our washers on our bolt, like so, and get our nut ready. And we'll take the arm, put it in position, push our bolt through. Now I'll have to fish the nut through from the other side. There's not a lot of clearance back there. So once you've got that one just done finger tight and the nut started, I should probably have mentioned before you put that in place, make sure the inside lip is tucked inside the bottom skid plate, because otherwise you won't get it in there. Now we're going to take one of our clamps and goes in position like this, and then one of our bolts and washers. We'll just start that one finger tight as well, like so. Just get that started, and then the lower one we'll do the same. The washers on our bolt, take our clamp, and it goes like this behind the A-arm, and pop our bolt in there. Let's get that started. Like so, and then we'll tighten all of those up and repeat the same on the other side, and that'll be it for the front A-arm installation. Next step will be the rear trailing arm protectors, and then we're finished. So the last pieces of the kit to go on are the rear trailing arm protectors. That's these pieces here, and the way they go, the curved lip there, that goes towards the rear of the machine, because that's what protects your outer CV boot, and you'll see that in place when we get it installed. As far as the hardware for installing these, we've got one clamp per side. That's part number 18, and that's this clamp here that's sort of a Z bend with a lip, or a U shape. It's the part number 18, and to attach with the clamp we're going to use two part number 21, that's an M6 by 30 millimeter bolt, two part number 30, M6 flat washer, and of course two part number 32, the dish washers. We're also going to use the two factory holes that are in the trailing arms that were used for the factory protectors, and the hardware we're going to use with that is part number 20, M6 by 20 millimeter bolt, 2 per side. Part number 30, the M6 washers, 2 per side. Part number 32, the dished washers, 2 per side. and part number 35, the M6 nylock washers, 2 per side. So I'll show you first, just hold it in position and show you where the protector goes. Tucks up inside here, and that's basically the position that it'll go in. So we'll start first by showing you where the clamp goes. So the clamp is going to go in this orientation, like this. And we're going to hook that behind this bar on the trailing arm, like that. And then when we put the protector in place here, we take our longer bolts, our washers, set that up. We'll just get that started. Now you want to do this up enough so the clamp doesn't swivel out of place when you let go of it. Tighten that up a little bit. Like so. And then using the factory tool holes, let's get our bolts and washers ready. And nylock nuts. And then we simply put one through each. Actually, I'll start on the outside one. I have room to work. Let's get the bolt in there, and then we'll go behind and get the nut started. And then once we get the 2 bolts through, get the nut started, then we can check that everything's lined up properly, and then we'll take our 10mm socket, and we'll need a 10mm wrench on the back of these 2 to hold the nuts, and we'll tighten these up. And then we repeat the same process on the other side, and that's it for the complete install. After that, I'll go over it, check the alignment, tighten all the fasteners properly, and then we'll finish up with a couple of shots of the whole thing finished and put together.